Welcome to Becoming Arketype, where we explore the science and strategy of natural health optimization and performance so that you can achieve your ideal self. I am Dr. Ryan Sousley. Hey, welcome back to the show. Let me ask you this. How many of you feel like you are working harder than ever and you're more exhausted or you have less energy than ever? And I want to let you know that you're not alone. Life keeps getting busier and busier and faster and faster. In fact, I don't know anybody who's slowing down or doing less. If anything, it's the opposite. And I'm right there with you. I mean, we have 4 kids. We have 3 kids who are in club sports, and we own a business, 2 clinics. You know, we manage a team of about 15 people, and life just gets busier. And I totally get that. So the truth is, when it comes to stress, that it's not about eliminating stress. I don't think there is such a thing. And actually, we wouldn't want to, because stress is what causes muscles to grow. Stress is what causes our immune system to get stronger. Stress is even what causes us to do better in life, you know, whether it's school or business or sports. So stress is not necessarily a bad thing. It's your body's ability to handle that stress and build resilience so that it can take that stress and turn it into a good thing. You know, and the problem is that most people think that stress just comes from mental or emotional sources. You know, it might be deadlines or conflict or worry or interpersonal, relationship issues. But stress, research shows that your body doesn't know the difference between the source of stress. Stress can actually come from things like dehydration or lack of movement or improper movement, repetitive use in an improper way, chronic pain, even bad posture and toxins. All of these things accumulate and they add to your total stress load. In fact, scientists call this your allostatic load. It's the cumulative wear and tear on your system. And like I said, a little bit of stress is not a bad thing, but when the allostatic load or the total amount of stress supersedes your body's ability to handle it, then your body goes into a state of dysfunction. And dysfunction leads to burnout and leads to disease and even an early death. And that's why they call stress the silent killer. And so in today's episode, I'm going to show you give you practical research-backed action steps to lower the allostatic load and start building resilience in your body so you can do better. Before we dive in, just want to encourage you, hit that subscribe button. If you like this show, if you feel like there's value in it, when you subscribe to the show, it helps us reach more people, get our message out there. We keep the show going. And if you have certain things that you want to learn about, like certain topics, leave a comment in the comment section, wherever you're listening to this. I do actually pay attention to those. So if you have something you want me to talk about or discuss or bring a guest on in, we're going to start doing that as well. So let's jump in. So 5 most common hidden sources of stress. Number 1 is fear and anxiety. Humans are unique in the sense that we can relive the past or imagine the future more vividly than any other species, and it's a gift, it's an evolutionary advantage. But when you live in a state of regret or fear of the future more than you live in the present, your nervous system stays in fight or flight mode. I mean, think about this. Like when you're thinking about the past, sometimes you're able to recall happy memories, but a lot of times when you stew on the past, you're thinking about the things that you did wrong or the things that went wrong or the mistakes that you made or the failures that you had. And that's okay. I mean, there's lessons to be learned through failure, obviously. But when you're constantly in a state of reliving the past in a negative way, it puts your nervous system into fight or flight or survival mode. And same thing, regarding the future. In fact, I've heard psychologists say that, pretty much the only source of anxiety or depression is, reliving, like fear of the past or regret from the past rather, or fear of the future. And when we think about our future, I think sometimes we have the ability to harness optimism and vision casting and goal setting and all those things. But a lot of times, especially when it comes to fear and anxiety, we're worried about what could happen in the future. Like what's going to happen to the economy? What's going to happen to this relationship? What's going to happen to my business or my health or whatever it might be? And the reality is it's a possibility, but it hasn't actually happened yet. And again, humans have an evolutionary advantage to be able to learn from the past and forecast the future and be prepared for the future better than any other species. But when you spend more time locked in the past or the future than you do in the present, again, it puts your nervous system into fight or flight mode or sympathetic dominance. And the problem with that is, again, a little bit of that is a good thing, but a lot of that is a bad thing because chronic or perpetual sympathetic dominance, when your nervous system is stuck in sympathetic dominance, it raises cortisol and adrenaline, which these are hormones that are great for our body for survival. Like if you're being chased by a bear in the woods, thank God your body has the ability to produce cortisol and adrenaline because it's the thing that's going to allow you to escape and not become that bear's dinner. But obviously, if you're running from the bear nonstop, eventually you're going to get exhausted and you're going to either become the bear's dinner or you're going to die from trying to escape, right? So long-term stress is not a good thing. It increases cortisol and adrenaline. Those are your stress hormones. Those hormones, even though they allow you to survive, they cause a lot of havoc in the body too. I mean, think about this, like when you're being chased by a bear in the woods, your blood pressure goes up, your cholesterol goes up, deep breathing goes down. So short, chest breathing goes up. Your long-term immune system goes down, even though short-term immune factors go up. Your long-term memory goes down and is inhibited, whereas your short-term memory goes up because your brain's looking for a way out, but it doesn't really care about remembering things in the past or long-term memory. So again, short-term it's good, long-term it's bad. The other thing that science shows is that long-term stress shrinks the hippocampus, affecting memory and mood. It also spikes blood sugar and suppresses your immune system. We talked about that. So what do you do about it? Well, you can't just get rid of stress. You can't just never worry. But what you can do to bring yourself back to the present is you can practice what I call box breathing. And when I say I call it, I didn't invent box breathing. In fact, this is a technique that they've trained Navy SEALs to do and first responders and people that are in really stressful, tense situations. And what it does is it calms your nervous system down so that you can focus and it brings you into the present. And so what box breathing literally looks like, if you can imagine a box, you would inhale for 4 seconds. So slow inhale for 4 seconds. You'd hold your breath for 4 seconds. Then you'd exhale for 4 seconds. And then you'd hold your breath for 4 seconds again. So if you imagine a box, it's in for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4. And there was a study done, published in the Research of Frontiers in Psychology, 2017, showed that slowing your breathing down, which box breathing is one way to do that. It's not the only way, but probably the most popular and effective way. But slowing your breathing down reduces cortisol in your bloodstream. And it also improves heart rate variability, which some scientists and researchers argue that heart rate variability is maybe the number one leading indicator of overall health and longevity. So real quick, what is heart rate variability? Well, it's your body's ability to adapt to its environment. So heart rate variability is your pulse, it's your heart rate. And what we want to have happen, better heart rate variability means that your body has the ability to increase heart rate really quick. That would be like in a situation where you're being chased by a bear in the woods, but then also downregulate heart rate really quick when the bear goes away, right? Or you need to settle down, you need to go to sleep, you need to focus, you need to digest food, you need to rest and recover. So it's this heart rate variability that, we want to see improve over time. Focusing on your breathing really helps you do that, at least in the moment, right? And you might say, well, is box breathing going to get rid of all my problems? And the answer is obviously no. But if you're in a situation or if you're in a current state where you're constantly stressed out, doing box breathing multiple times throughout the day, I can tell you, I personally do this and it's amazing how effective it is. A lot of these things that I'm going to go through today, they seem so simple. It's like, there's no way that box breathing is going to shift my hormones, my hormone balance to an extent that it's going to make that big of a difference, right? Like hydration's the next one that we're going to talk about. A lot of times people disregard these things because they're so simple, but the reality is that health is not complicated, right? I mean, health is actually pretty simple. The problem is that when people think something's too simple, they don't do it, right? Because what's simple to do is also simple not to do. But if it's good enough for the Navy SEALs and first responders, I think it's good enough for the rest of us. So box breathing, that's number one. Number two, hidden source of stress is dehydration. And again, super simple. A lot of people know that you're supposed to supposed to drink water. You're supposed to stay hydrated. But we know that when you're dehydrated, it puts your body into sympathetic dominance, right? Because your body doesn't have all of the organic materials that it needs. It doesn't have enough hydration to carry out its physiological functions and, meet the physical demands of the day. And so it puts your body into sympathetic dominance, right? It's like fight or flight on a really small scale. And the other thing that it does is it increases inflammation. When you're dehydrated, your total body inflammation goes up. So if you're the type of person that struggles with chronic pain, or maybe you feel like you get injured and you just don't recover very quickly, or the slightest little thing like gardening for an hour and then all of a sudden you have back pain for 2 or 3 days, or maybe even a week, of course there may be some kind of structural issue that you need to have looked at. But I can tell you that just being dehydrated is like gasoline on the fire. And so, most people think that hydration is just water, but under stress, your body loses sodium, potassium, and magnesium also through the kidneys. And without those electrolytes, your nervous system can't fire correctly. So things slow down, right? So the general rule of thumb is you need at least 50% of your body weight in not just water, but hydration, which means water and electrolytes. You need at least 50% of your body weight in ounces of water or hydration every single day. So what does that mean? If you weigh 150 pounds, you got to be drinking at least 75 ounces of water and electrolytes. And I would even recommend adding trace minerals to your water, because trace minerals are naturally found. Like if you drink water from a natural spring that's clean, it's got trace minerals. The problem is with all the water filtration, aquifer systems that feed into a municipal water, cleansing system, and then you get it out of the tap. Or even if you use like a reverse osmosis or some kind of water filtration system that you've put on your house, most of the time it depletes the water of the trace minerals, not to mention all the electrolytes. So adding trace minerals, which you can get in like a small dropper form or a powder form at the health food store, very inexpensive. If you add a little bit of trace minerals, and then you also add some electrolytes to your water, and then you just sip on that all day long, and you get at least 50% of your body weight in ounces, I promise you're going to have better energy, better mental clarity, better recovery, less pain. And it really does help reduce the allostatic load or the stress load on your body. Okay, number 3, blood sugar instability. This is a big one because you are what you eat. And unfortunately in America, the average person consumes over 60% of their diet every day in the form of carbohydrates or sugar. And carbs are not necessarily bad. The problem is if you eat too much carbs, especially in the form of processed sugar or artificial sweeteners or things like that, it can increase your blood sugar a lot. Like you get these spikes, but then also over time, like if your blood sugar is chronically elevated, eventually that leads to a condition that we know as type 2 diabetes, right? They used to call it the sugar, right? In the South, like we lived in the South for a little while and they called type 2 diabetes, even semi-recently, people are still calling type 2 diabetes the sugar, because we know that diabetes forms when you have elevated blood sugar over a long period of time. But it's really blood sugar instability that really wreaks havoc on your nervous system, because when you eat processed carbs or sugar, you get these blood sugar spikes and then crashes, and each crash triggers cortisol and adrenaline, which compounds your stress load. When it comes to diet, you can think about macronutrients like this, and macronutrients would be carbohydrates, fats, and proteins. You want to try to keep an even keel or an even blood sugar, whenever you eat food. You don't want these big spikes and crashes. That's what wreaks havoc on your nervous system. But you can think about macronutrients like this. Carbohydrates are kind of like the kindling for a fire. So it's like when you put kindling on a fire, what happens? It lights really quickly, it burns really bright, really hot, really fast, and then it goes out just as fast as it lit, right? Whereas like not protein, but fats, because your body doesn't love using protein for fuel, because protein, supplies the building blocks that your body repairs and recovers and builds tissue out of. But you can think of fats in terms of energy. You can think of fat more like the big log that you put on once the fire is already going. And so if you can get that log on fire, you need a lot less of it, and it stays burning a lot longer. So it's a more slow, controlled burn in terms of energy production. And you need both, right? Like you need kindling to get the fire started. So you need some carbohydrates, but I would say that people would be a lot healthier if they consumed a lot more healthy fats and a lot less carbohydrates, especially in the form of processed foods or sugar, right? So there's a study done in Diabetes Care 2007 showed that post-meal glucose spikes increase oxidative stress and inflammatory cytokines. So what does that mean? When your blood sugar goes way up after a meal, like you had a bunch of breadsticks or a bunch of pizza or a bunch of French fries or potato chips or whatever it might be, when your blood sugar goes way up after a meal, it increases oxidative stress and inflammatory cytokines. Inflammatory cytokines mean pain. So if you have a lot of pain or if you have chronic pain, reducing your carbohydrate intake can massively improve, pain perception or pain experience, because those inflammatory cytokines have the chance to go down and your body can mitigate that stress more effectively. But even oxidative stress, oxidative stress is what causes us to age faster. Like if you take a bite of an apple and you throw the apple out into your yard, you just set it on the counter and you leave it there, even within a few hours, that apple starts to turn brown. That is a perfect example of what oxidative stress is. It's that organic material reacting with oxygen, and it's causing it to decompose and degrade faster. Well, literally, your body does the same thing just over a longer period of time. And some of that's natural, but if you can reduce oxidative stress so that you don't age faster than you're supposed to, then that's a really good thing. And we know that things that cause oxidative stress are things like a high sugar diet, lack of activity, poor hydration, nervous system stress, lack of sleep or recovery. It's basically all the things that we're talking about today. But increased allostatic load, or increased stressors from blood sugar instability increases the rate of oxidative stress in your body, causing you to age faster than you want to. So what's the action step? The action step, my recommendation, what I tell patients is to follow the PFF rule. And PFF stands for protein, fat, and fiber. Fiber, I would say, is like the missing macro. We always think of macronutrients in terms of the three big ones, like protein, fat, and carbohydrates. But really, fiber is what feeds your microbiome. And today's episode is not about gut health. We'll probably do one of those in the future. But if you're not eating enough fiber, your body can't absorb and assimilate nutrients nearly as well. And fiber is what feeds your microbiome. And just in terms of body weight, your entire body weight or body mass, relative to the cells that make up your body, you have microbes that live on and in your body that outnumber your human cells 10 to 1. So our microbiome is extremely important. In fact, people that have dysbiosis or a microbiome that's unhealthy are a lot more susceptible to things like chronic pain, leaky gut, autoimmune disease, even cancer, because the microbiome is so important. So the rule is, whenever you go to eat, make sure that you eat protein, fat, and fiber. And I would even say eat those things before you eat anything that's really heavy in carbohydrates or sugar, let alone processed sugar, which you should probably be staying away from anyway. But the point is that when you focus on protein, fat, and fiber at every meal, it keeps your glucose steady or your blood sugar steady. It stabilizes your energy, your focus, and your mood. And that's really what the goal is. The goal is not to get rid of carbohydrates, altogether. The goal is not to never eat processed foods or never eat fast food, although I would recommend avoiding it if you can. But if you can prioritize protein, fat, and fiber, follow the PFF rule, your blood sugar spikes will level out a lot better. And again, the whole goal is to reduce allostatic load to keep your nervous system out of that fight or flight or that sympathetic dominance. Okay. Number 4, this is blue light and screens. This is tough. I'm not going to lie. This is tough because like right now I'm on a computer and I'm inside. There's so much blue light. So you can't get away from it. Maybe if you went and lived out in the bush and you didn't ever have a screen, but then you wouldn't be listening to this. So this probably doesn't apply to you anyway. But the reality is that, we're surrounded by technology, we're surrounded by blue light, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. But the problem is that your brain uses light to regulate circadian rhythms or your sleep cycle. And blue light from phones and computers or devices, blue light tricks your body into thinking that it's daytime because blue light is really prevalent in the morning. And then as the day goes on, blue light goes down and red light goes up. That's a lot of why sunsets look more red and orange and sunrises have more blue and green to the color. So, what you want to do, like if you have trouble sleeping, if you have trouble getting to sleep, which is called sleep latency, the amount of time that it takes you to actually fall asleep once you go to bed, there's a good chance that reducing blue light exposure, especially in the later part of the day, will help incredibly with your sleep and recovery. And really, that's what this is all about. It's not that screens in and of themselves cause stress or cause your nervous system to go into sympathetic dominance, but it's really about ensuring that your circadian rhythms are healthy, and that hormones like melatonin, be balanced. You can have the right amount of melatonin, the right amount of cortisol. You want a lot of cortisol in the beginning of the day. You don't want a lot of cortisol at the end of the day, because that'll keep you up at night. There's actually a study done at Harvard that showed that 6.5 hours of blue light exposure suppresses melatonin twice as much as green light and shifts your circadian rhythm by up to 3 hours, which means if you're on a device or watching TV late into the evening or even nighttime, your circadian rhythm can get thrown off by up to 3 hours. So what do you do about it? Well, I call it a digital sunset. Depending on what area of the world you live in, sometimes throughout the year, the sun doesn't actually go down. Like, we're in North Idaho. And so like in the summertime, like June, early July, it stays light till like 10:30, sometimes even 11. I try to go to bed at like 9, at the latest. And so we close all the shades and we turn off all the lights and everything else. But, getting rid of blue light can signal to your body that it's bedtime, or that your body can at least, on a physiological level, start getting ready for bed. And it'll be a lot easier to get to bed or go to bed, get to sleep, stay asleep, and get a good night of recovery sleep, which is really what sleep is all about, right? It's so that your nervous system can heal your body while you're asleep. And that's really the reason why sleep is so important. In fact, they've done studies and they've found that if you were to, like, the number one way to kill someone through lifestyle modification is not a processed food diet. It's not sedentary lifestyle. It's not bad posture. It's not a lot of stress. It's not a lot of toxins. Like, those things over time would definitely take its toll and eventually kill you, most likely. But the number one way to kill someone quickly is to deprive them of sleep. And why is that? It's because your body's not able to recover and repair. And so it's super important that on a regular basis, you're putting your body into a state where it can recover and repair. So the digital sunset, in my recommendation, would be to block blue light after 7 p.m. So if you're going to bed anywhere around 9, 10, even 11, you want to try to block blue light for about 3 hours at least before you actually start to go to bed. Because again, it signals to your body that the sun went down. There's no more blue light. Physiologically, your body can start getting into sleep mode. And I would even recommend getting rid of screens altogether 30 minutes before bed at least. The other reason why getting off screens right before bed is a good idea, especially, like your phone or a tablet, like being on social media, which that's not what this is all about right now. Again, probably a topic for another time. But, social media, it's part of the world that we live in. A lot of people think social media is the devil. I think there's some good that can come from social media, and that does come from social media. Like, it keeps us informed, and it's a fast way to get information and get news. And I think there's some really positive influencers out there that are doing really good things. Also decentralizes the news and information so that you don't have these conglomerates that are curating everything that you learn or hear about. However, with social media, it's for the most part, it's a popularity contest. You get on social media and you look at everybody else's life, and it's like this polished, edited version. Like, nobody puts their behind the scenes on social media, or very few people do. They put their highlight reels out there. And so if you're scrolling social media and you're looking at everybody else's highlight reel, the natural response is to think about how crummy your life is. It's like, man, I'm nowhere near as successful or fit or beautiful or whatever compared to this person or all these people. Like, man, I'm such a failure. And that's not real. That's not the reality. It's just when you're constantly looking at stuff like that, that's kind of the natural. I mean, I've even felt like that. So that's why I have to be really careful about just scrolling social media. And I have to be really careful about the people that I follow and don't follow. So I just think, if you can minimize social media, especially at the end of the day, right before you go to bed, because your brain's going to continue to ruminate on whatever you put in as an input towards the end of the day. All right, that's the digital sunset. And then number 5 is spinal stress and subluxations. And as a chiropractor, I love talking about this just because this is what I do all day long. This is what I've done for over 15 years in my clinic. And we help people with functional health and nutrition and hormone balance and detoxification and that kind of thing. But this has been the number one focus of mine with patients over the last 15 years. And the reason why this is so important, why it's relevant to the conversation we're having about stress, is that your nervous system controls all adaptation. And remember, stress is not a bad thing. It's your body's ability to handle stress and respond to stress that really makes the difference. And what happens is if your spine shifts out of alignment from bad posture or slips, trips, and falls or injuries, sometimes even the birth process can cause this. We call that a spinal subluxation. And spinal subluxations are when the spine's out of alignment and it interferes with the nervous system's ability to do its job, because the nervous system runs through the spine. Just like your skull protects your brain, your spine's job is to protect the extension of your brain, which is your brainstem, your spinal cord, all the nerve roots, which connect to literally every cell, tissue, and organ in your body. And so, I think when people think about it or they see a chart of anatomy, I think it makes a lot more sense. But, your brain has to send signals down the spinal cord and out the nerves to every cell, tissue, and organ in your body, just like electricity has to flow through the wires and give power to all the appliances in my house. Like if I cut the wire in the ceiling that goes to the light goes out, the light dies. And the same is true with your body. In order for your heart to beat or your lungs to breathe or your stomach to digest food or even for a cut to heal on your hand, your brain has to send signals through the nervous system to be able to have clear communication. And then your body actually sends signals back to the brain. It's this necessary feedback loop for your body to restore and maintain homeostasis. But when the spine's out of alignment, we know that it causes stress, right? It's kind of like a kink in a hose or a dimmer switch. And so it interferes with the signals from the brain to the body and the body back to the brain. And so it causes dysfunction or dysregulation in the nervous system, and things can break down. It's a big stressor on the system because it disallows the body to adapt to its environment appropriately, right? We talked about this on the last show, but health is all about adaptation. And so like when you go outside and it's 100 degrees, your body sweats. That's your body adapting to its environment. When you're being chased by a bear in the woods, your blood pressure goes up. That's your body adapting to its environment. When you go outside and it's 10 degrees, you shiver. That's a smart thing. That's your body adapting to its environment because it's trying to survive. And so, those are extreme examples, but even when you're just under, a significant amount of stress or even just a minor amount of stress, like let's say it's a deadline at work or it's marriage problems or, it's poor diet or a lack of activity or poor fitness, those are all stressors that we're talking about today. But your nervous system is the system that has to adapt to all of that, right? One of the most common causes of spinal subluxations, and this is something that you can start doing at home. If you have major subluxations or something that, you're probably not going to be able to fix on your own, this is where I would recommend going to a chiropractor, and especially one that takes x-rays and does corrective care. But forward head posture is a big deal. You've probably heard the term tech neck or text neck. And where that came from was the Journal of Physical Therapy Science 2015 found that when you have forward head posture, like chronic and sustained forward head posture, not just looking down for an hour or something like that, but when your posture literally goes from upright to flexed and your head goes in front of your shoulders start to get rounded, you end up with that little hump on your back, which we call a dowager's hump. But when you have forward head posture, it can decrease your lung capacity by 30%. And then that may not seem like a big deal to you, but we all need air to breathe. We need oxygen. You can't live without it, right? And so if you have 30% less oxygen getting into your system because your lung volume or your lung capacity goes down, then that means you're getting 30% less of arguably the most vital nutrient that our body needs, oxygen, with every breath that you take all day long, 24/7. And you can only do that for so many months or years before it starts creating so much stress that it leads to some type of dysfunction in your body, right? And also means less oxygen to your brain, higher heart rate, more stress on your system. And so it's just not a good thing, right? And so you can start to be mindful of your posture right now. Again, if you have a major subluxation or a spinal injury or postural distortion, you may actually need to go to a chiropractor, let them take x-rays, put you on a corrective care plan to fix it, structurally. But you can start paying attention to your posture right now. And I promise you, even just being mindful of your posture throughout the day, like let's say you work at a desk, or you drive a lot, or you're just sitting for a long period of time, or maybe you even stand a lot, but a lot of what you do is looking down. Like even as a chiropractor, most of what I do all day long, even though I'm moving around and I'm standing, is I'm looking down at patients and I'm working with my hands, down, and I'm forward flexed. So the way to mitigate that is, every 30 minutes to an hour, try to do something that reverses that posture. We know that the posture that you're in the most is going to become your permanent posture over time if you don't do something to reverse that posture, right? So it's kind of like if you took a wire hanger, which I know they don't really make much of anymore, except for when you get your clothes from the dry cleaners. It's always funny. It's like, man, where do they get these even? But if you were to take a wire hanger and you were to bend it just for a few seconds and then let go, it comes back to its original form, right? But if you keep bending it over and over and over again, or you were to bend it and hold it there for several minutes or several hours, eventually that hanger is going to take on that shape and it's not going to go back to where it was. So your temporary posture becomes your permanent posture unless you're doing something to reverse it on a regular basis. So again, my recommendation is every 30 minutes to an hour, do something that reverses your forward flexed posture, right? Stand up, extend your head backwards, put your arms back behind you, grab something behind you, get your shoulders to roll backwards. And even just doing that, a few times a day will increase your lung capacity. You'll have better mental clarity. You'll probably have less back pain, less headaches because, number one, you're putting your spine into a better posture, which means less mechanical stress on the nervous system, but you're also increasing lung capacity and you're improving oxygen exchange in your body, which again, your body obviously has to have. So those are the 5 things. So I hope this was helpful for you. The 5 most common sources of stress that you can do something about right now without running away from your life is number 1, fear and anxiety. So we talked about doing box breathing, 4-second inhale, 4-second hold, 4-second exhale, and then 4-second hold. Doing that on a regular basis decreases cortisol and adrenaline in your bloodstream. It'll cause you to focus better. You'll have less anxiety, and it's a way to bring your mindset back to the present, even in an immediate circumstance. Number 2 is hydration. So we had talked about drinking at least 50% of your body weight in ounces of water every single day. So if you weigh 150 pounds, you want to drink at least 75 ounces of water. And again, we talked about adding electrolytes and trace minerals because hydration is not just water. It's the stuff that's supposed to be in water and that's actually found in water in nature. Like in nature, you actually have electrolytes and trace minerals in water, but we distill all that stuff out when we process water, we filter it too much. The next one was blood sugar instability. So the rule was to focus on the PFF rule, protein, fat, and fiber with every single meal. Keeps your blood sugar more level so you don't have these spikes and crashes, which again increases cortisol, increases oxidative stress, inflammatory cytokines. The next, number 4, was blue light and screens. Again, we're trying to normalize our circadian rhythm and not trick our body into thinking it's still morning when it's like 9 o'clock at night. So the digital sunset was to start blocking blue light at least 3 hours before you go to bed. And then preferably you'd get rid of screens altogether at least 30 minutes before you go to bed. And then last one was spinal stress and subluxation. So, again, if your spine's really out of whack and you've got like disc issues or osteoarthritis, or you've got major misalignment patterns from previous injuries or repetitive use trauma, you probably ought to go see a chiropractor, let them take x-rays and put you on a corrective plan of some sort. But at the very least, you can start being mindful of your posture, and, doing so every day is going to increase lung volume. It's going to increase oxygen exchange in your body, which is going to reduce stress on your nervous system, improve cognitive function, memory, executive function, that kind of thing. I want to give you a quick story because, again, a lot of times people hear these things and they're like, man, those things just sound way too simple to be that effective, and I think that thought has actually been propagated by the pharmaceutical industry and even, modern medicine, because they want us to believe that it requires a drug or it requires a surgery or something that you got to go to a doctor for or a hospital for. And obviously there's a time and a place, like if you're in a crisis or you have a really serious condition, then you might need medical intervention. However, most of the time, the most common issues that people deal with are lifestyle issues. And the thing is that if you lifestyled your way into it, you can also lifestyle your way out of it. You just have to actually do it, and so that's why, like, if you have a major health issue, like, you may need to go seek treatment or maybe even get on a pharmaceutical temporarily just to buy you some time. Although I think that's not usually as necessary as people might think it is. But if you have to do that and you don't address the lifestyle factors, then you're really just chasing symptoms. You're really just treating symptoms. You're not actually addressing the underlying root cause of the problem, which means more than likely, even if you do buy yourself some time, you're going to be back at square one before you know it. And this is one of the main reasons why people end up frustrated and they end up on multiple medications. Even though the initial medication might have treated the symptom effectively in the short term, you didn't fix the root cause of the problem, which means you ended up on more medications, or the problem just continued to get worse because you didn't fix the root cause of the problem. Well, I have a patient who came in about 6 years ago, and her name was Maria. She was 52 years old. She's a realtor. And so, very busy, but also very stressed out because realtors, typically it's like feast or famine, right? But at 52 years old, she struggled with migraine headaches, fatigue, thyroid problems. She was really, really overweight, and she'd been to a bunch of doctors. Like, she went to a hormone specialist, she went to a weight loss specialist, pain specialist. She even had developed this autoimmune condition called Hashimoto's thyroiditis, which is an autoimmune problem with your thyroid. And they give you this drug. There's a few available. One of the most common ones is levothyroxine. And they give you this drug and they tell you got to take it for the rest of your life because supposedly autoimmune issues like Hashimoto's thyroiditis are uncurable. And so, she was on this drug and she'd been on it for almost 10 years and she didn't like it. She didn't want to be on it, but she didn't know what else to do. So she comes in, we take x-rays, we do a full workup on her, functional health workup. And, we put her on this corrective plan. And when I say corrective plan doesn't mean you just come in every once in a while and you get adjusted for pain. It doesn't mean, you go change your diet for a week or even a month. I mean, we put her on this really aggressive plan to try to address as many of these lifestyle factors as possible. And even spinal subluxations. That's one of the reasons why I'm telling her story today is when we took her x-rays, she'd lost almost 100% of the curve in her neck. So if you look at your neck from the side, front to back, it's supposed to be straight. Most people know that. But if you look at it from the side, you have to have this C-shaped curve. It's called the arc of life. And the reason why you have to have that is it creates strength and stability. In fact, if you look at your spine as a whole, it looks like a coil or a spring. And those curves allow us to resist gravity, absorb pressure, run, jump, sit, stand, and it allows us to distribute pressure and stress throughout the whole structure of the spine. It also allows the spine to bend and move. Think about it like your knee. Like if your knee didn't have the ability to bend, every time you jumped and landed, you'd injure your knee because it's got to have some kind of give. The other thing that the curves do is they allow the spinal cord to be loose and relaxed so that there's no tension, there's no pressure, there's no stress on the spinal cord. Because like we just talked about, the spinal cord is the conduit that the brain uses to send signals to the rest of the body to tell it what to do. And then the body sends signals back up through the spinal cord to give the brain feedback so the brain knows how to adapt to its environment. Well, because of a car accident that Maria had been in almost a decade earlier, she had lost almost 100% of the curve in her neck. And it was probably the car accident combined with, living over a computer for the next 10 years as a realtor, putting deals together and contracts and listings and everything else. And so we put her on an aggressive care plan to restore the curve in her neck. And it was a combination of specific adjustments, physical rehab or spinal rehab at home to increase strength and stability in the right muscles and create laxity and mobility in the right ligaments and muscles. And then we also gave her a targeted nutrition plan. We got her to do a lot of the things that we talked about on the show already. We got her to eliminate processed foods and eat more whole foods. We got her to start hydrating. We got her to get rid of blue light and at least put on blue light blocking glasses towards the end of the day. And so we were approaching this from every angle that we possibly could. And within 2 months, her migraines completely went away. Her neck pain completely went away. And so we took another set of x-rays just to make sure that we were making progress. And then we put her on a maintenance plan. So she was coming in a lot less, but she was still working on all the lifestyle modifications that we gave her. And 3 months after that, she went to her doctor and she had her blood work taken. And normally at this point, they would tweak her dose of levothyroxine. And unfortunately, usually it would go up and it would go up and it would go up, which actually makes sense because if you're not fixing the cause of the problem, typically you need more of the drug to accomplish the same effect. And for the first time ever, her doctor was like, I don't know what you're doing and I never see this, but you can actually stop taking the levothyroxine. And I think initially they titrated it down a little bit just to make sure, but within a couple of months, she was off the levothyroxine altogether. And so she came back and she's like, I don't know how this happened. And I said, well, it actually makes sense because the nerves that control your thyroid come out of the middle part of your neck. And so when we restored the curve in your neck, which we had improved the curve by about 50%, it wasn't 100%, but 50% improvement, which is actually pretty substantial. I mean, think about like if you went from a 100% blocked artery in your heart to a 50% blocked artery in your heart, doesn't mean your heart's 100%, but you're probably going to feel a lot better and your heart's going to be working way better at 50% versus 100%. So, we looked at her x-rays and I showed her how this is possible. And she goes, man, that's amazing. I never would have thought in a million years that a chiropractor would have been able to help me with my thyroid. And I tell you this because that's the funnest thing that I get to do as a chiropractor is show people that everything is connected in the body. Your nervous system and your spine aren't just about back pain, neck pain, and headaches, but when you clear the nervous system of interference by putting the spine back into a position that's congruent with the way the body's designed, like your body's not designed to have major spinal subluxations or misalignment or even bad posture. Your body's designed to be in alignment, and we're designed to move and nourish our body in a congruent way. When you give the body what it needs, the body has this amazing ability to heal, right? The other cool thing is because her thyroid healed within 6 months, she lost over 50 pounds. I mean, think about that. Like she lost over 50 pounds. Her migraines went away, neck pain went away. She got off this drug that she was on for over a decade. And it was all just by doing these simple things that gave her body the right ingredients, the right materials, and put her body into a state where it could heal itself, right? And so I tell you that story because if she can do that, you can too, but you've got to remove the interference. And so I know we talked about a lot today, the 5 most common hidden sources of stress: fear and anxiety, dehydration, blood sugar instability, blue light and screens, and then spinal stress and subluxation. But remember, stress isn't just mental. It comes from any number of things, and your body doesn't discriminate between the source. It just sees stress as stress. And so maybe for you, it's picking one thing that you can start focusing on today. But I promise if you can reduce the allostatic load and start to build resilience so that your body can deal with stress better, you're going to feel a lot better. You're going to have less pain. You're going to have better mental focus, better sleep and recovery, better energy and stamina, and overall health and well-being is going to go up obviously as well. So listen, if today's episode gave you something that you could put into practice, the best way that you could support the show is by leaving us a review. So if you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, just leave us a review. And if there's a specific topic that you want to hear more about or a specific guest that you want to see on the show, I'll do my best to make that happen as well. So this is how you become archetype, taking back control of your health and moving closer to the ideal version of yourself. That's the whole point of this show. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.